The Galactic Interstellar Academy of Sciences stood as the greatest center of learning in all 12-star systems, and beings from every corner of known space traveled vast distances just to walk through its ancient halls. Professor Velthos moved toward the front of Lecture Hall 9 with the careful grace of his kind, his crystalline body catching the light and scattering it into rainbow patterns across the walls. He had given this same lecture for nearly 40 cycles now, and he knew every word by heart. Today, he would teach his students about the most dangerous places in the universe, the worlds that no living creature could ever hope to survive. 500 students filled the massive hall, their bodies representing dozens of different species from across the galaxy. There were the tall and willowy Selvians with their 4 arms and gentle blue skin, the small and furry Cathari who communicated through a complex system of chirps and whistles, and the mighty Dreth whose armored bodies could withstand the vacuum of space for short periods. All of them had come to learn, and Professor Velthos was eager to share his knowledge. "Welcome to Xenobiology 472, Velthos announced, his voice resonating through the crystal structures that made up his throat. "Today we will discuss a topic that fills even the bravest hearts with dread. We will discuss death worlds." A murmur ran through the crowd, and several students shifted nervously in their seats. Everyone had heard stories about death worlds, those terrible planets where conditions were so extreme that life itself seemed impossible. Velthos activated the holographic display behind him, and a 3-dimensional image of a blue and green planet appeared, spinning slowly in the air. "This," Velthos said with a dramatic pause, "is Sol 3, known to ancient star maps as Earth. It is classified as a Category 12 death world, the highest and most dangerous classification we have." The students gasped, and several of them leaned forward to get a better look at the terrifying world. "Let me explain why this planet earned such a terrible distinction," Velthos continued, his crystalline fingers dancing through the air to highlight different features of the hologram. "First, we must consider its star Sol is a yellow dwarf that constantly bombards the planet with deadly radiation. Any unprotected being would develop cellular damage within minutes of exposure." He zoomed in on the planet's atmosphere, showing swirling clouds and weather patterns. "The atmosphere is perhaps even more dangerous. It contains 21% oxygen, a gas so corrosive that it causes most metals to rust and decay. Breathing this air would burn the lungs of any sensible species." A Cathari student in the front row fainted, and 2 of her classmates quickly carried her out of the hall. "But that is merely the beginning," Velthos said, clearly enjoying the dramatic effect of his lecture. "Liquid water falls from the sky without warning in a phenomenon called rain. Sometimes this water freezes into solid chunks of ice that strike the ground with tremendous force. The natives apparently call this hail." He changed the image to show massive storm swirling across the planet's surface. "Electrical discharges called lightning strike the surface millions of times each day, and winds can reach speeds that would tear apart any structure we might build. These storms can destroy entire settlements in mere hours." The hologram shifted again to show the planet's interior, revealing layers of molten rock beneath the surface. The ground itself is unstable. The planet's crust is broken into massive plates that constantly shift and grind against each other, causing earthquakes that can level cities. Sometimes the molten rock from below erupts through the surface in catastrophic volcanic events. Velthos paused to let this information sink in, watching his students with satisfaction as they trembled in their seats. "And we have not even discussed the life forms," he added, changing the display to show various Earth creatures. "Every environment on this world contains predators, creatures evolved specifically to kill and consume other living things. There are predators in the water, predators on the land, predators in the air, and even microscopic predators that invade the bodies of larger creatures." The images showed sharks, lions, eagles, and magnified views of bacteria and viruses. These microorganisms are perhaps the most terrifying of all. They reproduce at incredible speeds, evolve constantly, and can kill a host within days or even hours. No species we know of could survive exposure to Earth's microbial life. Velthos straightened his crystalline form and spread his arms wide. In conclusion, Earth is a nightmare world where everything, the star, the atmosphere, the weather, the geology, and the biology, seems designed to kill any creature unfortunate enough to exist there. Our scientists have determined that no sapient species could ever evolve under such hostile conditions, and the planet has been marked as permanently unsurvivable. He smiled, pleased with his presentation, and prepared to move on to his next example. Are there any questions before we continue? A hand rose in the back of the lecture hall. Velthos squinted his crystalline eyes, trying to make out the figure in the dim lighting of the rear seats. The being appeared to be bipedal, with 2 arms and a round head covered in dark fur. No, not fur, but fine strands of some kind. Yes, you in the back, please stand and state your question. The figure stood, and Velthos felt a strange sensation run through his crystal matrix. Something about this being seemed wrong, seemed impossible. My name is Marcus Chen, the creature said in a voice that was somehow both soft and strong, and I have to respectfully disagree with your conclusion, Professor. The lecture hall fell absolutely silent. I am from Earth, Marcus continued, and I can assure you that my planet is very much survivable. In fact, we have approximately 8 billion people living there right now. Professor Velthos stood frozen in place, his crystalline body flickering through colors that indicated extreme confusion and disbelief. That is not possible, he stammered, his voice cracking like breaking glass. Earth is a Class 12 death world. Nothing could survive there. Marcus shrugged his shoulders in a gesture that Velthos did not understand. I survived there for 27 years before I came here, Marcus said calmly. I grew up in a place called Chicago, which gets very cold in winter and very hot in summer. I played outside in the rain as a child, and I have been struck by lightning once. It was not pleasant, but I recovered. Students throughout the hall began to panic, scrambling over each other to get away from the creature that should not exist. Please remain calm, Velthos said, though his own voice was shaking. Security, please report to Lecture Hall 9 immediately. But Marcus simply stood there, with a confused expression on his strange flat face. Did I say something wrong? He asked, seeming genuinely puzzled by the chaos around him. I just wanted to let you know that your information about Earth might be a little outdated. We have cities and restaurants and schools and everything. It is actually quite nice during spring. Velthos stared at the human, for that was what this creature must be, a human from Earth, and felt his entire understanding of the universe crumbling around him. Everything he had taught, everything he had believed, everything the Academy had accepted as fact for thousands of years, was suddenly called into question by this single, impossible being. The human called Marcus Chen had no idea that his simple correction would change the course of galactic history. But as he stood there in the back of Lecture Hall 9, surrounded by terrified aliens and one very confused professor, he was about to become the most important discovery the Academy had ever made. Word of the human spread through the Galactic Interstellar Academy of Sciences faster than light itself could travel, and within a single rotation of the station, every being on board knew about the impossible creature from the death world called Earth. Marcus Chen found himself suddenly famous, though not in the way he had hoped when he first arrived at the Academy seeking knowledge and adventure. Instead of attending classes and making friends, he spent his days surrounded by scientists and researchers who watched his every move with a mixture of terror and fascination. They recorded everything he did, from the way he walked to the sounds he made when he slept. Remarkable, whispered Dr. Delaney. a tall Selvian xenobiologist with 4 arms that never stopped moving. The creature maintains a constant internal temperature of approximately 37 degrees that would cook the internal organs of most species. Marcus sat patiently on an examination table while dozens of sensors scanned his body. "I am not a creature," he said politely. "I am a person and my name is Marcus. Also, 37 degrees is actually considered normal for humans. If my temperature goes much higher, it means I am sick." The scientists exchanged horrified glances. "You mean your body temperature can go even higher?" Dr. Delaney asked, her voice trembling. "Sure," Marcus said with a casual shrug. "When we have a fever, our bodies heat up to help fight off infections. Sometimes it goes up to 40 degrees or more. It is uncomfortable, but it usually helps us get better." Dr. Delaney had to sit down, her blue skin turning pale. Over the following days, the researchers discovered more and more impossible things about human biology. They watched in horror as Marcus consumed what he called lunch, a selection of dead plant and animal tissue that he heated with fire and then placed directly into his mouth. He chewed this material with hard white bones that grew from his gums and then swallowed it into a pit of acid inside his body. "You digest food using hydrochloric acid?" one researcher asked, unable to hide his disgust. "Yes," Marcus replied while chewing. "Does everyone not do that?" They learned that humans required the corrosive oxygen gas not just to breathe, but actually to survive. Marcus would die within minutes if deprived of the deadly substance. They discovered that his body was filled with a red liquid that carried nutrients and fought infections, and that this liquid was pumped by a muscular organ that never stopped working from birth until death. "Your heart beats approximately 100,000 times per day," Dr. Delaney calculated, "and it does this continuously for your entire lifespan. How do you not die of exhaustion?" Marcus laughed, which startled everyone in the room. "I never really thought about it," he admitted. "It just works on its own. I do not have to think about making my heart beat." But perhaps the most terrifying discovery came when a laboratory assistant accidentally exposed Marcus to a Class 3 pathogen, a microorganism that should have killed him within hours. Marcus sniffled and coughed for 2 days, complained about feeling tired, and then announced that he was over his cold and ready to return to normal activities. The entire medical staff was baffled. "His immune system," Dr. Delaney explained to the Academy Council during an emergency meeting, "is unlike anything we have ever encountered. It identified the pathogen, developed specialized cells to combat it, and then destroyed the infection entirely. Furthermore, his body now appears to be permanently immune to that particular organism." The council members sat in stunned silence around their great circular table. "How is this possible?" asked High Counselor Vreth, an ancient Dreth whose armored body creaked whenever she moved. "How can a being from a Class 12 death world survive exposure to diseases that would kill our strongest warriors?" "I believe," Dr. Delaney said slowly, "that humans evolved under constant assault from millions of different pathogens over millions of years. Their immune systems became incredibly powerful because they had no other choice. Those whose bodies could not fight off infections simply died." The council called Marcus to appear before them, and he arrived wearing what he called casual clothes, a strange combination of fabric coverings that left his arms exposed. "Marcus Chen of Earth," High Counselor Vreth began, "we have many questions about your presence here. First and most importantly, how did you travel to our academy?" Marcus scratched the back of his head nervously. "Well," he began, "about 5 years ago, a spacecraft crashed in the desert near a place called Arizona. I found it while I was hiking, and I spent about 3 years figuring out how it worked." "You reverse-engineered alien technology?" another counselor asked in disbelief. "I had help from the internet," Marcus explained. which is like a giant network where humans share information. Between that and some books on physics and engineering, I eventually got the ship running again. And then you simply flew yourself across the galaxy. It took a while to figure out the navigation system, Marcus admitted. But once I understood the basic principles, it was not too different from reading a map. I just pointed myself toward the nearest populated system and hoped for the best. The council members looked at each other with expressions of deep concern. This human had taught himself interstellar navigation using nothing but salvaged technology and his species' primitive information network. Not because he had to, not because he was ordered to, but simply because he was curious. When you arrived at our academy, High Counselor Vreth continued, you enrolled as a student through the standard application process. Did no one question your species of origin? Marcus shrugged again, a gesture the council was beginning to recognize as typically human. The application form asked for my homeworld, and I wrote Earth. I guess nobody checked whether it was supposed to be inhabited or not. The entrance examinations were challenging but not impossible, and I passed all of them on my first attempt. This caused another wave of uncomfortable murmurs among the council. The Academy entrance examinations were designed to test the intellectual capabilities of the galaxy's most advanced species, and this human, this being from a world they had classified as unsurvivable, had passed them without any special preparation. We face a difficult situation, High Counselor Vreth announced to her fellow council members. Marcus Chen enrolled legitimately, passed all required examinations, and has broken no laws. Technically speaking, he is a student of this academy with all the rights and protections that status provides. But he is a Deathworlder, protested Counselor Fenn, a nervous Cathari whose fur stood on end. What if he carries diseases that could spread to other students? What if his violent nature causes him to attack someone? What if his presence here endangers us all? Marcus raised his hand politely. Excuse me, he said, but I have no intention of hurting anyone. I came here to learn, not to cause trouble. I have all my vaccinations, and I promise to wash my hands regularly. The council debated for many hours, but in the end, they could find no legal reason to expel Marcus Chen from the academy. He would remain a student, though he would be watched constantly and subjected to ongoing medical examinations. His movements would be monitored, his interactions recorded, and his biology studied in exhaustive detail. Marcus accepted these conditions with a good-natured patience that seemed to be another inexplicable human trait. I understand your concerns, he told the council as the meeting concluded, and I will do my best to prove that humans are not the monsters your records make us out to be. All I ask is a fair chance to show you who we really are. As he left the council chamber, Marcus had no way of knowing that his greatest challenges still lay ahead. For while the council had decided to let him stay, not everyone at the academy was willing to accept a Deathworlder walking among them. In the shadows of the great station, forces were already moving against him, and the true test of human resilience was about to begin. The weeks that followed the council meeting were some of the loneliest Marcus had ever experienced, and he had once spent an entire winter alone in a cabin in northern Canada. Students gave him a wide berth whenever he walked through the corridors of the academy, pressing themselves against the walls and averting their eyes as he passed. Parents sent messages to their children warning them to stay away from the dangerous Deathworlder. Professors refused to share enclosed spaces with him, conducting his lessons through video screens while he sat alone in empty classrooms. One instructor actually fled the room screaming when Marcus sneezed unexpectedly. "It is just allergies," Marcus called after the terrified alien, but the damage was already done. His dormitory neighbors had all requested transfers within the first week. Leaving Marcus alone, in a section of the residential area that now felt more like a quarantine zone than a home. He tried not to let it bother him, reminding himself that these beings had spent their entire lives believing Earth was a death sentence. Their fear was understandable, even if it was painful. But not everyone feared Marcus Chen, some hated him. The Purist Coalition was an organization that had existed at the Academy for centuries, dedicated to the belief that certain species were superior to others, and that lesser beings contaminated the purity of galactic civilization. To them, a human was not just frightening but fundamentally wrong. Their leader was a Dreth named Corax, who believed that allowing a Deathworlder to study alongside proper species was an insult to everything the Academy stood for. "This creature does not belong here," Corax told his followers during a secret meeting in the lower levels of the station, "and if the Council will not remove it, then we must take action ourselves." The first attack came on a quiet night when Marcus was sleeping peacefully in his quarters. Purist sympathizers disabled the environmental controls in his section of the dormitory, shutting off the heating systems and venting half the oxygen from his rooms. They expected to find a frozen and suffocated corpse when morning came. Instead, Marcus emerged the next day wrapped in a thick blanket he had brought from Earth, looking irritated but very much alive. "Something is wrong with the heating in my room," he told the maintenance staff. "It got really cold last night, reminded me of camping in Minnesota when I was a kid." The purists were baffled. How had the humans survived temperatures that would have killed any other being on the station? How had he continued breathing in an atmosphere with barely enough oxygen to sustain a candle flame? They did not understand that humans had evolved to survive extreme temperature variations, that their bodies could slow down and conserve energy in the cold, that their lungs could extract oxygen even from thin air. Marcus shivered through the night, but shivering was something humans had done for millions of years. It was uncomfortable, not deadly. The second attack was more direct. Corax personally authorized the release of a Kandorian stalker into the Academy grounds, a horrifying predator from a prison world, bred specifically to hunt and kill dangerous criminals. The creature was nearly invisible when motionless, could track its prey by heat signature alone, and possessed claws that could slice through metal. The stalker was released near the library, where Marcus often spent his evenings studying. What happened next became the stuff of Academy legend. Marcus was walking back to his dormitory when he heard something moving in the shadows. His heart rate increased, his muscles tensed, and his eyes dilated to take in more light. All automatic responses that humans had developed over countless generations of being hunted by predators. When the stalker lunged at him from the darkness, Marcus did not freeze in terror like most species would have. Instead, something ancient and primal awakened inside him, a survival instinct that predated civilization itself. He dodged the first attack by throwing himself sideways, rolling across the ground and coming up in a fighting stance. The stalker was fast, but humans had evolved to fight fast predators. The battle that followed was brutal and short. Marcus grabbed a metal pole from a nearby maintenance station and swung it at the creature with all his strength. The stalker was powerful, but Marcus had something it did not expect: adrenaline. This remarkable chemical flooded his bloodstream, increasing his strength, speeding his reactions, and dulling his pain. Humans called it the fight or flight response, and Marcus had chosen to fight. The security team found Marcus sitting on the ground an hour later, breathing heavily and covered in scratches, but alive. Beside him lay the body of the Kandorian stalker, its skull crushed by repeated blows from the metal pole. "It jumped out at me near the library," Marcus explained to the shocked security officers. "I did not have time to think, I just reacted. Is this someone's pet? Because I feel really bad about killing it." Word of the incident spread through the Academy like fire. The Deathworlder had killed a Kandorian stalker, a creature used to execute the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy, using nothing but a metal pole and his bare hands. The purists had wanted to prove that humans were dangerous monsters who needed to be eliminated. Instead, they had only proven that humans were survivors adaptable, resilient, and utterly unwilling to die quietly. Corax was furious, but his followers were beginning to have doubts. They had thrown everything they had at the human, and he had survived it all. Perhaps, one of them suggested nervously, we should leave the human alone. He has done nothing to harm us, and our attacks have only made him more famous. But Corax refused to listen. The creature must die, he insisted, and if we cannot kill it through indirect means, then we will have to be more creative. Meanwhile, Marcus went about his life as best he could, unaware that he had just narrowly survived 2 assassination attempts. He attended his classes through video screens, studied alone in the library, and practiced what he called jogging in the station's recreation areas, a bizarre human ritual that involved running for extended periods without any apparent purpose. Other students began to watch him with curiosity rather than fear. They saw him helping a young Cathari student who had dropped her materials in the corridor, kneeling down and gathering up the scattered items with a gentle smile. They saw him apologizing profusely to a maintenance worker whose equipment he had accidentally bumped. They saw him sitting alone in the dining hall, eating his strange dead tissue meals while reading something on a small handheld device. He does not seem very dangerous, one student whispered to another. Maybe the Deathworld classification was wrong, her companion replied. Maybe Earth is not as terrible as we thought. Slowly, very slowly, attitudes began to shift. A few brave students started nodding to Marcus when they passed him in the corridors. One professor agreed to teach him in person, though she kept a large desk between them at all times. A Selvian named Talia even sat down across from him in the dining hall one evening and asked what he was reading. It is called science fiction, Marcus explained with obvious delight. It is stories about space travel and aliens and the future. I used to read them as a child and dream about visiting other worlds. And now you have, Talia observed. Yes, Marcus said with a smile that seemed to light up his entire face, and it is even more amazing than I imagined. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Marcus Chen felt like he might actually belong here, like he might actually find a place among the stars. But the greatest test of his survival was still to come, and soon he would need every ounce of human resilience to face it. The emergency alarm woke Marcus from a deep sleep, and he sat up in his bed with his heart pounding, and his mind instantly alert. Another gift from millions of years of evolution on a world where danger could strike at any moment. Red lights flashed through his quarters as a calm voice announced that all students should report to their designated emergency stations. Marcus pulled on his clothes and hurried into the corridor, joining the flow of worried aliens moving through the academy. Within the hour, everyone had gathered in the great assembly hall, and High Counselor Vreth addressed them from the central platform. "We have received a distress signal," she announced, her ancient voice heavy with concern. "From the research vessel Starlight Hope 32 of our finest scientists were conducting experiments in the hollow expanse when their ship suffered catastrophic damage. They are currently stranded with failing life support and no way to escape." A wave of gasps and worried murmurs swept through the crowd. The hollow expanse was one of the most dangerous regions in known space, a nightmare zone filled with deadly radiation storms, unpredictable gravitational anomalies, and an asteroid field so dense that navigation was nearly impossible. "We have run every simulation," Vreth continued, "and attempted every possible rescue scenario, but the conditions in the hollow expanse are simply too extreme. The radiation alone would kill any pilot before they could reach the stranded vessel." Her voice cracked with emotion. I am sorry to say that we may have to accept the loss of our colleagues. The risk of sending a rescue team is simply too great." Marcus felt something twist inside his chest, a feeling that humans knew very well but rarely talked about. It was the feeling of knowing that something was wrong, that people were dying, and that standing by and doing nothing was simply not acceptable. He raised his hand. The entire assembly hall turned to look at him. And Marcus suddenly felt very small and very alone, but he did not lower his hand. "Yes, Marcus Chen," High Counselor Vreth asked, her tone a mixture of surprise and exhaustion. "I would like to volunteer for the rescue mission," Marcus said clearly. The hall erupted in chaos. Students and faculty shouted over each other, some laughing at the absurdity of the suggestion, and others expressing outrage that the Deathworlder would dare speak during such a serious moment. But Vreth raised her armored hand for silence, and the noise gradually subsided. "Explain your reasoning," she said simply. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward so everyone could hear him. "You said the radiation would kill any pilot," he began, "but humans have been living under a star that bombards us with radiation for our entire existence. My body has natural defenses against radiation damage, and I can tolerate levels that would be lethal to most species." He paused to let this sink in. "You said the navigation is nearly impossible because of the asteroid field, but humans evolved to have fast reflexes and excellent hand-eye coordination. We developed these traits because we had to avoid predators and catch prey to survive. I believe I can navigate the field manually." "And if the ship's atmosphere is compromised?" Vreth asked, her eyes narrowing with interest. "Humans can hold their breath for several minutes while remaining conscious and functional," Marcus replied. "I can make repairs in a vacuum if necessary. It will not be comfortable, but I can do it." The council members huddled together in urgent discussion, while the rest of the assembly watched in stunned silence. Marcus stood his ground, his jaw set with determination. He did not know if he could actually do what he was proposing, but he knew he had to try, because that was what humans did when lives were at stake. "Your proposal is highly irregular," Vreth finally announced, "but we have no other options. Marcus Chen of Earth, you have permission to attempt this rescue. May fortune guide your path." Within hours, Marcus was strapped into the pilot's seat of a specially retrofitted shuttle, surrounded by monitoring equipment that would track his vital signs throughout the mission. Dr. Thelani herself had helped prepare the medical systems, and she pressed one of her 4 hands against the window as Marcus prepared to launch. "Come back alive," she said through the communication system. "That is the plan," Marcus replied with a nervous smile. The shuttle launched into the darkness of space, and Marcus turned his nose toward the hollow expanse. The first radiation storm hit him approximately 2 hours into the journey. Warning lights flashed across his control panel as deadly particles bombarded the shuttle, and Marcus felt his skin begin to tingle and burn. His body's defenses kicked in automatically, his cells working overtime to repair the damage as fast as it occurred. It hurt, oh, how it hurt, but Marcus gritted his teeth and pushed forward. The asteroid field was even worse than the simulations had predicted. Massive rocks tumbled through space in chaotic patterns, spinning and colliding and breaking apart into smaller fragments that were just as deadly. Marcus's hands flew across the controls, making constant adjustments as he weaved through the maze of destruction. His heart pounded, his muscles ached, and sweat dripped down his face. But his eyes never stopped moving, tracking dozens of objects at once and calculating trajectories faster than any computer. This was what humans were built for. This was what millions of years of survival had prepared him to do. 6 hours after launch, Marcus finally saw the Starlight Hope. The research vessel was badly damaged, with hull breaches visible along its side and emergency lights flickering weakly through the windows. He could see movement inside, which meant at least some of the crew was still alive. Marcus docked with the crippled ship and forced open the airlock, stepping into a nightmare of broken systems and failing life support. The air was thin and cold, but Marcus could still breathe barely. He found the survivors huddled together in the central laboratory, 32 scientists from a dozen different species, all of them weak and terrified but alive. "My name is Marcus Chen," he announced, "and I am here to get you out. Can everyone walk?" Some could, but many could not. Several were injured, and a few were so weak from oxygen deprivation that they could barely move. Marcus did not hesitate. He began carrying the wounded to his shuttle, making trip after trip through the damaged corridors. Some of the aliens were twice his mass, but adrenaline and determination gave him strength he did not know he possessed. Between trips, he worked on the ship's systems, using skills he had learned from reverse engineering the alien craft that had brought him to the academy. He rerouted power, sealed hull breaches with emergency patches, and somehow managed to restore partial life support. "How are you doing this?" one of the scientists asked in amazement. "Humans are good at fixing things," Marcus replied while attaching a patch to a cracked window. "We had to be stuff breaks down a lot on Earth, and we could not always afford to replace it." 14 hours after he had first entered the Starlight Hope, Marcus finally transferred the last survivor to his shuttle. His body was ravaged, radiation burns covered his arms, his muscles screamed with exhaustion, and he had not slept in nearly 2 days, but all 32 scientists were safe. The journey home was a blur of pain and determination. Marcus flew through the asteroid field one more time, his reflexes slower now but still sharp enough to avoid the deadly rocks. The radiation storm had passed, leaving him battered but alive. When his shuttle finally docked at the academy, Marcus barely had the strength to open the hatch. Medical teams rushed aboard, evacuating the rescued scientists and marveling at the impossible thing this human had accomplished. Dr. Delaney found Marcus slumped over his controls, unconscious but breathing. "You impossible creature," she whispered as she carried him to the medical bay. "You absolutely impossible, wonderful creature." Marcus would spend 3 weeks recovering from his injuries, but he would recover, because that was what humans did. And in that recovery room, surrounded by scientists who owed him their lives, Marcus Chen finally found something he had been searching for ever since he left Earth. He had found a place where he belonged. Marcus Chen woke slowly, his body aching in ways he had never experienced before. But when he opened his eyes and saw the warm light of the Academy's medical bay surrounding him, he smiled. He was alive. Dr. Delaney was at his side within moments, her 4 hands checking monitors and adjusting equipment, while her gentle face radiated relief and something that looked very much like affection. "You have been unconscious for 3 days," she told him. "Your body suffered severe radiation exposure, muscle damage, and what we believe humans call exhaustion, but your remarkable physiology is already repairing itself." Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "How are the scientists?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Did everyone make it?" "All 32 survivors are recovering," Delaney confirmed with a smile. "Some will need extended medical care, but all of them will live because of you." The days that followed were unlike anything Marcus had experienced since arriving at the academy. Visitors came constantly, students who had once feared him now bringing gifts and flowers and strange alien treats that Marcus could not eat but appreciated anyway. Professors who had refused to be in the same room with him now stopped by to shake his hand and thank him personally. The scientists from the Starlight Hope took turns sitting by his bed, telling him stories about their research and their families, and the homes they would see again because of his bravery. One elderly Selvian named Professor Keth wept openly as he thanked Marcus for saving his grandson, who had been part of the research team. "I have studied the universe for 112 years, Keth said through his tears, "and I thought I understood what was possible and what was not. You have shown me how wrong I was, and I will never forget it." Even the purest coalition had gone silent. Korax and his followers had disappeared into the shadows, their movement discredited by the undeniable fact that a being they had called a monster, had risked everything to save people who had done nothing but fear and reject him. But the most significant change was happening at the highest levels of galactic governance. The Galactic Council demanded a formal review of Earth's planetary classification, and representatives from all 12 star systems gathered at the Academy to hear the evidence. Professor Velthos himself submitted the reclassification proposal, his crystalline form dim with humility as he stood before his colleagues. "I have taught xenobiology for 40 cycles, he began, "and for 40 cycles I have told my students that Earth was unsurvivable, that no sapient species could evolve under such hostile conditions. I was wrong." He displayed holographic images of Marcus throughout his time at the Academy, studying in the library, helping other students, fighting the Kandorian stalker, piloting his shuttle into the hollow expanse. "Humans did not survive Earth despite its dangers," Velthos explained. "They survived because of them. Every challenge their world presented made them stronger, more adaptable, more resilient. The radiation taught their bodies to repair damage. The predators taught them to fight back. The harsh environments taught them to endure." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I propose that Earth be redesignated from Class 12 Death World to a new classification that more accurately reflects its nature. I propose we call it a Crucible World." The council members murmured among themselves. "A Crucible World," Velthos continued, "is a planet so hostile that any species surviving it emerges tempered and unbreakable like metal forged in the hottest flames. Earth did not create weak creatures who barely survived. It created beings capable of thriving anywhere in the universe." The vote was unanimous. Earth was officially redesignated as a Crucible World, and humanity was recognized as a species deserving of respect rather than fear. A ceremony was arranged to celebrate the reclassification, and thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds gathered in the Academy's Great Assembly Hall to witness the historic moment. Marcus was asked to speak, and he approached the central platform with obvious nervousness. Public speaking had never been his strength, and the idea of addressing representatives from 12 star systems made his stomach twist with anxiety. But when he looked out at the crowd and saw the faces watching him, some curious, some skeptical, but many warm and welcoming, he found the courage to speak from his heart. "When I left Earth," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "I did not know what I would find out here among the stars. I just knew that I wanted to see what was possible, to meet new people and learn new things and maybe find a place where I belonged." He smiled, and it was a genuine smile full of warmth and wonder. "I did not expect to be treated like a monster. I did not expect people to run away from me or try to kill me or assume the worst about my species. But I also did not expect to find friends, or to be given the chance to help people, or to discover that the universe is so much more amazing than I ever imagined." His eyes found Dr. Delaney in the crowd, and then Professor Keth, and then Talia the Selvian student who had been brave enough to sit with him in the dining hall. "Where I come from, we have a saying, 'What does not kill you makes you stronger.' Well, Earth tried really hard to kill us for millions of years, so I guess we got really strong." Laughter rippled through the assembly. "But strength is not the most important thing about humans," Marcus continued. "We are also curious. We want to explore and discover and understand. We are also kind. We want to help others and build connections and make friends. And we are also hopeful. We believe that tomorrow can be better than today if we work hard enough to make it so." He spread his arms wide, encompassing the entire assembly. I do not know what the future holds for humanity and the rest of the galaxy, but I believe we have a lot to offer each other. We have music and art and stories and food and a million other wonderful things to share. And I believe that together, we can do amazing things. The applause started slowly, but built into a thunderous roar. Beings from dozens of species rose to their feet, cheering and stamping and making whatever sounds of approval were natural to their kind. Marcus stood at the center of it all, overwhelmed and grateful and full of hope. In the weeks that followed, the Academy officially opened recruitment efforts toward Earth. First contact protocols were developed, diplomatic missions were planned, and preparations began for humanity to take its place among the stars. Professor Velthos personally rewrote his lecture on Earth, replacing the fearful warnings with a message of respect and admiration. Remember, he told each new class of students, humans are not monsters, they are survivors, explorers, and friends. Approach them with an open mind and an open heart, and you may discover that they have more to teach us than we ever imagined. And Marcus Chen, the human from the death world called Earth, continued his studies at the Galactic Interstellar Academy of Sciences. He attended classes alongside beings from across the galaxy, made friends he would cherish for the rest of his life, and eventually earned degrees in xenobiology and interstellar navigation, becoming the first human to graduate from the most prestigious institution in known space. When he finally returned to Earth to share everything he had learned, he brought with him something far more valuable than knowledge. He brought proof that humanity was not alone.